Fabulous. Well, thanks everyone for coming to week 3 of our series, Sorry Not Sorry, based on our little book that we've got, which is available at the back. This week we are doing a session on anger. Now, anger is something that's big. When we start to wander into the area of forgiveness, it raises all kinds of internal churn for us. And so we thought we might spend a whole session on that today, just talking about that. And joining us today, we said every week we've got a different friend who's going to be joining us on the couch. And Kerry Harrop is going to be joining us on the couch today. So Kerry is a registered nurse, like a long-term registered nurse, has done a lot of work, a whole lifetime of work on the ward, working with vulnerable families, particularly with kids that are preemie and
premature babies.
Yeah, premature babies and all that kind of stuff. So she has seen her share of things. She's also a great friend of ours, so and interested in the topic of forgiveness. So she's here to join us today. So that's going to be super great. And for the sake of the video, if you're joining us after the session, hi, I'm Glenn. This is Kylie. This is our little pop-up kind of church expression called Rhythms, and every now and again we pop up and we do stuff like this. And so it's great for people who just want to, you know, check out faith, check out psychology, check out all that sort of space without kind of getting too, or for who Sunday morning's not working. So it's great to have you join us if you're watching this after the fact. All right, well, we might just dive in. So Kerry, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you look after proceedings today for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. And thanks for this opportunity. It's great to be here with this really amazing series. I'm going to start a few questions. I wasn't here last week. What did we talk about last week?
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, we talked about 3 big ideas last week. The first of it was about justice. Like, it seems so unfair that if we forgive people, it's like they're let off the hook. So where is the justice in all that? And we talked about the fact that that God is in the business of setting all things right. That's his big arc of story of the universe, and that frees us from the burden of having to meet a justice, because that's a big, heavy weight to carry. And then we talked about grief and loss. You talked a bit about grief and loss. Say a bit about that.
Yeah, we did. Well, I think those things are fairly intrinsically tied to each other, that if we do have to practice acceptance around the fact that we might not get the outcome that we want, well, then that's sad. And we have to find a way of managing that. So we explored that a little bit.
That's right, we did. And we dived into the Psalms and we talked a little bit about lament.
We did.
Yeah, that's right. That was terrific. That all the range of emotions come into play there, and we can work our way through that honest kind of situation. And then finally, we finished talking about boundaries. So Jeff has a really strong focus on boundaries. He's got a really good sort of around that, and he gave us a little bit of a chat about how about the fact that, you know, forgiveness is important, super important, and concurrently, if the relationship is unhealthy, it's really important that we establish boundaries to stop ongoing harm. So he talked a little bit about how we establish boundaries, how we, first of all, recognise something inside of us is being violated, and that's important to recognise that. Then it was to set a boundary, and then the most challenging part, to hold a boundary, and then to deal with some of the consequences that come out of that. And that was basically what we talked about last week. And if people missed that on the video, that's available on YouTube. You can go back and watch it. Download the downloadables from the website.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Okay, now I believe there are a few questions submitted last week.
Oh, yeah, actually there are a few questions. One of the ones, we're not going to probably get to all of them, but one of the ones we wanted to talk about today in particular was a question around boundaries this is good. So one of the questions someone raised was about, what if my boundaries are formed out of selfish motives? So they were wondering, like in that case, they'd already set a boundary with someone. I think it was a work situation, and they were really worried that, well, maybe this is just my own selfishness that's set this boundary. So do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, a little bit. So one of the things we talked about, I think that question was around, how do I know? How do I discern whether or not it's a reasonable thing that I'm setting a boundary around with people? And so we spoke a little bit about the role of community and just having good people around you who can give you loving but honest feedback
Yes.
about whether or not that's a reasonable thing. Another thing we talked about was the fact that if you, thing that came up in the series earlier was, forgiving somebody doesn't mean that you have to be a doormat. It doesn't mean that they can just have free-for-all in your life and do whatever they like. But if you have had that type of a role in a relationship with a person and they're used to getting what they want, and you start to impose some boundaries or set them up with people.
So you've been a doormat for a while.
Yeah.
And then you go, you know what, I need to put some boundaries here to stop this ongoing harm. Yep.
Yeah. It's to be expected that that's not going to go down so well at the beginning.
That's right.
Because that person might be used to getting what they want, and that's how that relationship has functioned for a long time. So if you start to say, well, actually, no, I'm not okay with that, it's to be expected that they might arc up a little bit, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the boundary you're setting is inappropriate or selfish.
Right.
It just means that there is an adjustment occurring in that relationship, and that still applies. Having community around you to check in, and it doesn't mean that you've done the wrong thing or that you're being selfish. And they might even use words like you're being selfish or that sort of thing. But that, I guess, what we tend to do is default to old patterns when that kind of pressure's on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to, or that we've done the wrong thing.
So we don't need to cave when they put the pressure on to
Well,
say,
no.
this is really selfish what you're doing, because it might not be selfish
It
at all.
might not be.
Yeah.
It might just be that person's way of expressing, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I'm not used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm.
That's good. And in terms of a person struggling with, well, it's at those times I feel most selfish, because I feel like people are saying to me I'm selfish, then that's a role.
Particularly, and well, that's kind of a big topic, but if that is a belief that you have and that you operate in the world out of that belief, that maladaptive, unhelpful belief, really, that I need to sacrifice my needs over everybody else's needs all the time.
Yeah.
Well, then you probably will be a bit vulnerable
Right.
when people engage you that way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're being selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, they're good questions.
Great question.
So what are we going to be talking about this week, Kylie and Glenn? Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, you can talk about this week as well.
Well, I think what we're talking about this week is, if we go back to session 1, one of the things that we discussed was that in church, a lot of the time we get some good teaching around forgiveness, but it's often a bit light on in the emotional stakes. So, we hear that it's a choice, it's a decision, it's not a feeling, which is correct, but there are feelings that are involved when we go through this process. So today we're going to be focusing on those a bit more intentionally.
Yep.
Myself with my hat on as a psychologist, and Glenn's with his hat on as a pastor.
Yep.
Bible does actually have a lot to say about emotions.
Yeah.
And so does psychology, obviously. So we're going to try and marry those things up today in our presentation.
Fabulous,
So,
yeah. I think anger does get a lot of bad press in Christian communities. I think it sometimes gets conflated with, like, we feel anger and then we do angry things. And those are two sort of separate situations, and we want to kind of add a little nuance to some of that today, because God has given us this full range of emotions, and we're going to talk a little bit today about, believe it or not, the gift of anger, and how it's actually something that God has given us that's actually really helpful. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. But I think we haven't always had a lot of teaching about, well, what do we do when anger shows up? And the default has often been suppress or pretend. And neither suppress nor pretend are very good strategies for anything in terms of healthy living. So,
you've sort of said this, but I think when people hear about anger, they equate it with angry behaviours.
Yeah.
So, punching walls and kicking the dog
Punching
and
people
that breaking stuff and that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. Well, that's behaviour. That's not the actual emotion itself.
Sure.
The feeling itself can't make you do anything. So that's a little bit what we'll be unpacking more today.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so what would you say to the person who says, I'm a Christian, I don't do anger?
The short answer is I would say, yes, you do. Yeah. Yeah, and probably things we've just discussed, so it does get a bad rap. I have actually heard it said from the pulpit, that a goal should be to get rid of anger, that, maybe one day we'll get to the point where we don't feel anger at all. Well, that I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to that God created us with a whole range of emotions.
Yeah.
He experienced them himself.
Yeah.
We see it displayed in the
Yeah.
Bible. We are coming from the premise that he only, he's made us in his image and he wants the best for us and he only gives us good things.
Yeah.
So let's assume that the whole repertoire of feelings are of him and from him and, not to get rid of, that they can be healthy and helpful for us.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just framing it up a little bit. Can we have that wheel?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we have a slide for this.
We
I
do.
don't know if you can read this.
Yeah. This is what we call a feelings wheel. It's a little bit small.
Yeah.
But if you just look at the words in the middle, might be a good place to start. So, the red one's angry and, it goes around sad and happy and that sort of thing. I use this all the time in my work as a psychologist, and I found out that Jeff, who was here last week, designed it. So that was really exciting.
Yeah.
It comes in a range of languages, and yeah, it's really cool. So have a look at the anger one there, which is the red one. Okay, so angry is a word in the middle that has lots of connotations that we talked about before. But if we were to unpack that a little bit further, there are a whole lot of other words there that fall in that same spectrum. So, let down. Well, there's all the ones like furious and even jealous falls in that one. Things like numb, skeptical. So if you're a person who says, I don't do anger, have you ever experienced anything in that little quadrant there? Because they're all on that same continuum. And that's something that a lot of people may not be in touch with. Even resentful, things like we talked about that a lot last week, I think. So part of, I think, what we want to propose is that anger is not just that type of anger, that red-hot anger that, makes you want to break things and whatever. It can come on a whole range of presentations, if you like. So if you've experienced any of those things, maybe you're angry. Maybe that's a clue
Wow.
to what's going on for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, isn't it sinful to be angry?
Yeah, that's actually really a really good question. And the Bible is clear that when anger shows up and we respond with actions that don't line up with Jesus' way, then that's a problem, and people get hurt for sure. The Bible says that we're to set aside rage and anger and brawling and slander, every form of malice, but those are all behavioural things. And I think one of the things we want to say today that the Bible tells us that it's not wrong to feel angry, and it speaks quite factually of anger, but it is wrong to respond out of anger. And this is where I think we get a bit caught up, because it's actually important to acknowledge the anger so we don't get to the point where we respond out of the anger. And so this is the part we want, the piece of it that we kind of want to focus on today, is the stuff that prefaces all of that kind of stuff. So for instance, if you might think of Jesus at the temple, and he's cleaning up the temple and he's turning over tables and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, you might say that he's angry, and he is angry about what's going on there. So we can say that anger and forgiveness and justice and response are all happening all at once. So there is a feeling of violation that's happened, something really special. God's temple has been violated by people trying to monetize it and turn it into a business. And he's angry about that because that's wrong. But he isn't flying off the handle and going crazy. He's actually entering into a display that is in that society, causing attention to be drawn to the injustice that's occurring there. So there's a separation between the feeling of the anger, and then the quite measured response as he creates a whip, which has got to take some time, and then goes to the temple and institutes this transformation. So, so feeling angry itself is not sinful, but responding out of anger is going to lead to a whole bunch of sinful stuff. And we can talk a little bit.
We are going to talk a little bit more about that. I would argue that everything on that wheel is morally neutral. You know, there aren't good feelings and bad feelings. There are behaviours which are not value consistent and, perhaps not consistent with what the Bible would ask of us. Yeah. But the feelings themselves are not good or bad, but we get a lot of baggage around that.
We're sort of taught that there are good feelings and bad feelings.
Yeah, and we need to get rid of the bad ones, so we can only feel the good ones.
And I think what's so ironic about that is that the way we stop ourselves moving out into those angry spaces and destroying things is by doing the work with anger, which is the very thing we're told to suppress. Yeah. In fact, suppressing and pretending that it's not there is almost a surefire strategy for it to eventually explode, right?
Yeah, it's going to be like a pressure cooker that builds and builds, and if you're ignoring it and pretending I don't do it, pretending it doesn't exist, it's not like it goes away. No. So you kind of need to process it in a healthy or useful way to move through it and for it to stay at a healthy and manageable level.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Jesus is our example of that from a scripture point of view. Yeah, so anger shows up, but it doesn't lead to angry behaviour. It actually leads to actually well-discerned behaviour. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So, Kylie, what is the job of anger? Why do we feel it?
Yeah, well, I would suggest that the reason that we have emotions is just part of our, adaptive functioning. Like, they help us. They're our friend if they're all working properly. Sometimes when things get skew, for example, we've been bottling it or whatever, it might come out as anxiety or depression or something like that. But the job of it when it's functioning properly is it's a little light on our dashboard of our car to tell us that we've been wronged in some way. Something's up here, this isn't okay, So it's just for us to poke around a little bit and, what's going on, what's happened here that is not sitting right with me, that I might require some kind of response from me. So it helps us. It gives us a little prompt around that. So, yeah. Yeah.
So this is something, you said you had a little exercise that maybe goes with this?
Yeah, I did want to show a little exercise which I think fits here and fits with the what you were talking about before, how, our behavioural response to this feeling, like with any feeling, can either be helpful or less helpful. Yes. So there's a little model which we use a lot, or I use a lot in my work, in acceptance and commitment therapy, called the choice point. So let me explain it to you now. It's a very useful little tool, but you can apply it to lots of things in life. So the choice point I'm going to put as a little circle here. So every day, throughout life, we are faced with lots of decisions that we have to make. Sometimes they're small decisions, sometimes they're kind of in the middle, sometimes they're really big decisions, which require lots of thought and reflection. But we're always making choices and decisions about, do I do this? Do I put, Vegemite or peanut butter? Or do I enrol in that course? Do I marry that person? Is it going to rain today? Do I bring a jumper? So some of them are of not much consequence at all. And some of them are really do shape the course of our life. And, the choices that we make either take us towards the kind of person we want to be or the kind of life that we want to live, or they take us further away from those things. So in ACT language we would say that all these choices are either a towards move or they're an away move. And to go back to the question that was raised at the beginning of the session around how do I know whether it's a towards move or an away move, well, if you're in touch with your values or what really matters, kind of person you want to be, kind of life you want to live, what you stand for, what you're all about, that will help you to make good choices or towards moves here. What tends to happen to us sometimes, when life is going easy and that sort of thing, it's making towards a move makes a lot of sense, and why would we not do that? But when life is difficult, what can happen is that we can get hooked, which we're going to talk more about in a later session, I think next week, by all sorts of thoughts, feelings, memories, that actually pull us more towards making an away move. And anger is a very concrete example of how that can happen sometimes. So, I don't know, give me a scenario of somebody disappointing or...
everyone at work is going out for a drink and I'm not invited. Everyone is.
Okay.
So I'm feeling some anger about the person organising that. Yeah,
okay, awesome. Yeah, so everyone at work is going out for drinks and they didn't invite me. Okay, so first thing I really want to do is have a look at that wheel up there. Maybe you could do it for me.
Yeah, I can look at the wheel.
Yeah, tell me what's going on.
I'm aggressive.
Oh.
I'm frustrated.
Okay.
Maybe I'm annoyed.
Yeah.
Potentially infuriated, but maybe initially it's annoyed.
Okay.
Let's start with annoyed.
Annoyed. That sounds like a difficult feeling to experience, is it?
Well, annoyed is probably the first experience. There's maybe some others that are almost around. I don't know, left out or abandoned or not lovable or
okay,
deeper.
sure. So we're starting to move into other spaces there of maybe the blue one or the grey one. But they also sound very quite difficult, unpleasant feelings to experience.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Very
sure. Yeah. For all of us. Yeah. We're not
Yeah.
pretending anymore. We're naming it, right? Okay. So when we experience difficult feelings like anger and all those things you mentioned there, we want to get rid of them. We want to take them away.
Yeah.
So what we can do is get pulled towards an away move, if that makes sense, to make that feeling go down. Because if I do go punch a wall or, gossip about that person or whatever it is, I'm probably going to feel better in the moment. So that's quite tempting to just, be led in the direction of your feelings without actually consulting your values.
Yeah.
So what we are suggesting is an alternative way to that, is to take a step back, notice what's going on, name it, like we did the dropping anchor that time. Okay, I'm feeling upset. I'm feeling
annoyed.
Yeah.
I'm feeling hostile.
Yeah.
I might be feeling jealous.
Yeah, sure. Okay, awesome.
Isolated or
disrespected. I might be feeling that, or resentful.
Okay. So, that is a really key step which most of us skip. We're like, that's just whatever, of course, I'm those things, whatever. What do I do? What do I do to get rid of it?
Yeah.
But if we can actually slow the whole thing down and just be honest and name and notice that that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm actually feeling really jealous. That's a hard thing to confront maybe in ourselves, but if we can do that and kind of breathe into it, just take a minute, that sort of thing, then we give ourselves that amount of space to go, okay, what is the action required here? And then we can make a towards move. We're not making an emotionally driven away move, we're making a values driven towards move as to what is the behaviour that's required here.
So I might have a value. So what's a value that? So if it's my workplace, say.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe a value for me is team.
Yeah. Sure.
Really
okay.
Team.
Right. Okay. So if your value is team, what could the towards move be here possibly?
I don't know. I was going to say slash their tyres, but that's probably not the right thing.
Well, let's go with slash your tyres.
Have a conversation. It might be. Have a conversation about that somehow.
Okay.
That sounds threatening, but that would
find the social coordinator and go and meet with them to see if they got any ideas.
Run my own drinks night.
Run your own
And
drinks.
invite everyone.
So slashing tyres, that is an option, right? Like that's one of the things that we could do. Does that take you closer to the kind of person you want to
No,
be, the kind of
it
life
definitely
you want to live?
I don't
So
want to do
in that moment, that would feel like a towards move maybe because you'd feel good when you were doing it, and then it would create all sorts of other problems which would be not consistent with the kind of life you want to live for yourself. So if we can kind of slow the whole process down a little bit and take a breath, be honest, what's going on right now, we've got a better shot at responding in a values consistent way rather than an emotion driven way. Doesn't mean you don't feel those things anymore. And I'm not saying it's easy to do the towards move here. I mean, sometimes the towards move might be to drop it, you know, and just go, you know what, like, you know, I've got a vulnerability around here, like I get upset when people, and they're allowed, you know, that. But sometimes if it's consistently happening and it's really upsetting you, then probably the towards move is to maybe speak up about it or something. And how you do that is your choice, but just taking one little step in the direction of this as opposed to the direction of that. Like maybe it's having a quiet word with someone that you feel a bit safer with, or, you know, something like that. You know, hey, I didn't realise that was on. What happened? Or, you know, just something like that. That's something that takes you in the direction of team, which is what you identified as your value there.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
So, that's really helpful.
Okay, and you can apply this model with all sorts of things in your life. So, yeah.
One of the things you've talked with me before about is clean pain and dirty pain. And I found that's been quite a helpful...
Have we talked about that here before?
I don't know if we have, so...
What do you want
me
to say
about that? Can you say a word or two about that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, but the concept of it is that in life, I could draw another thing really quickly, if you bear with me. Okay. So in life, we're going to have good days, bad days, ups and downs. So, you know, if we're sort of measuring distress or being uncomfortable or that sort of thing is higher, you know, we're going to have bad things happen and then they'll go good for a while, then they might go even better, and then something bad will happen again and then, you know, go down and that sort of thing. So this is kind of our lot while we're here on earth. We're going to sometimes, you know, not have great days, not feel fabulous. Yeah, Bible promises us that.
Yeah.
So that is what we would describe as clean pain, is all, sorry, above that, is this kind of stuff here. So we can't control that, you know. A lot of the time that's just life happening to us. So, you know, people get sick, or, you know, people do fall out of relationship, or whatever it is. Bad things happen, difficult things happen. This is clean pain and we can't do much about it. That's when we have to practice acceptance. Dirty pain is this kind of space up here, which is all the things that we do to try and get rid of these things which we actually have little control over. So, you know, they might be things like, you know, all sorts of avoidant things that we do to pretend it's not happening. They might be things, things to run from, like to try and avoid feeling, basically. All the things we do to try, but actually make it worse, actually make our distress bigger rather than less. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. Does that make sense, or do you have questions?
Yeah. So, I mean, that for me is, like in that team situation, okay, I've been slighted by this drinks situation. Like you said, like maybe the first time it's just, don't worry about it, like just move on. Like it's not really
Maybe it's a you thing.
It's a you thing, yeah. That sounds like a you problem. But if that happens several times, then maybe I do want to raise it because it is conflicting with my values. And then I've got the choice, do I raise it with the person? Yeah. Or do I just run away from that? And that to me is like, well, raising it with the person is one kind of pain. That's your clean pain. Yeah, because that will be hard, right? That won't be fun, but it will be moving you more towards, you know, your values. That'll feel terrible, but... Yeah, it will feel terrible, but it'll be the right thing to do. But it'll be the right thing to do. Or I can just suppress it, ignore it, and that's your dirty pain. Like that has its own set of pain. Because now you've been rejected and you're feeling jealous and that sort of thing, and you're feeling all these other things of, you know, the rumination and all the stuff that comes along with trying to Yeah,
run from it instead of facing it.
so good.
Yeah. So,
I found that really helpful.
okay, cool.
Super
Okay,
good. Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so this anger, why do we feel so uncomfortable still if we have anger?
Yeah, I guess this is what I wanted to raise today, that the idea of could we potentially reframe this as the gift of anger? And I know that's going to be super uncomfortable for us because we're so kind of got so many hang-ups around what anger is and how it could rage out. And it may not feel like a gift because it's quite unpleasant to experience it, but they still communicate something to us. And I think it can also give us some energy and motivation to fix some things, right? Like it's not really right, some of these situations that we feel angry about, and anger can in fact give us some
Move
motivation.
things along.
Yeah.
And I think that's why physiologically it feels like it wants to mobilise you.
Right.
Like that is by design, I think, because
Right.
it's quite a like a visceral, thing that you experience in your body
Yep.
that makes you want to go towards action.
Yes.
And that can be constructive action. It doesn't have to be destructive action.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's, by design that this is not right. We need to fix it, need energy for that.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, right?
Definitely, that's
Yeah.
what it feels like. And we
Yeah.
talked about last week that how, this forgiveness piece isn't at odds with this justice piece. Like there is a forgiveness component, but there's also a justice. Like this is firing up in us because something unjust is happening
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And that may be really helpful for us to confront. But I think the thing I wanted to talk about today, or have us take away today, is that obviously anger has its limits. Like it's actually not a very good strategic planner. So for instance, my anger initially wants to slash someone's tires. So it might motivate me to do something, but it might also motivate me to do something stupid. So
Well, that's why you have to have some strategies around slowing everything down.
yes.
So can I do another quick thing? So this
Sure
is
you
a
can.
thing we do with the kids, but it's useful for all of us around if this is our brain here. And this part here is the thinking, reasoning brain. So that's the prefrontal cortex. This part here is the emotional brain. So it's the amygdala and whatever else is in there. These guys, we function best as humans when these guys are talking to each other. When we start to get above a 7, 8, 9 out of 10 in terms of intensity for any emotion, but anger's a good one for an example, they say we flip our lid and this part of our brain, the thinking, reasoning part, literally shuts down. So we can't use our words anymore. We can't reason our way out of it anymore. And this guy on its own, which is the emotion part of brain, doesn't make good decisions. It helps us make decisions, but only when it's in conjunction with this thinking, reasoning part of our brain. So when we flip our lid and emotions are running the show, we need strategies to be able to integrate that again so we can make good decisions.
Yep.
And we do that by slowing everything down, by grounding ourselves, using strategies like that drop anchor. And that's why people say things like take deep breaths and whatever,
Yep.
which people get frustrated, but there's some science behind it. It's really just to get your thinking, reasoning brain back online again so you can make values-driven decisions and not just emotion-driven running amok decisions.
And I think that process you walked me through here with the feelings wheel
Yeah.
was an example of that, because I'm raging about not being invited to this thing.
Yeah.
And then like my whatever pea brain,
Amygdala and
my amygdala
what-
brain is like wanting to just react and do something
I think
crazy.
there's more, but
But then my thinking kind of brain that God's given me allows me to sit with that emotion and go, what am I feeling right now? Let me have a think about that. And I can sit with that for a bit. And that's really where I want to be, because it
Yeah.
stops me reacting.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
respond rather than react.
yeah,
And that's exactly where I want to be.
yeah.
Um,
So it's mindfulness really is the word that we would use in the kind of biz, but
Sure,
that's
sure.
a complicated word for lots of people.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. So I just want to highlight here that, like, ongoing anger, like if we don't do this work, ongoing anger, like unforgiveness, is just saps so much energy, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're angry all the time, you're one of those people that's just angry all the time about things, it actually is taking away energy that you could be using to, become the kind of person that you want to become, or move toward the kind of person you want to be, or do the kind of things you want to do.
Yeah, and even use your anger to do good in
Yes.
the world, like activism or, I don't know, whatever. Like lots of towards moves can come out of the feeling of anger.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think if we just highlight today about, when the scriptures say to get rid of anger, like, this is how we do it. We actually sit with it and allow God to do this work with it.
Rather, yeah.
So when I'm saying get rid of anger, I mean get rid of angry behaviour. And
Yeah,
doing
well,
violent
I
things.
think for me, it's a reframe around that this is our friend, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad, it feels uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean it's, inherently bad. It's morally neutral, like
Yeah.
all the others. And so I don't need to be afraid of it when it shows up. It can't force my hand to behave in a certain way.
Yep.
I can slow everything down. I can invite God into that space. So
Yep.
I can be in the room, anger can be in the room, Jesus can be in the room, we can all be in the room together,
Yep.
and we can kind of start to make sense of it and move forward in the way that we need to.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I think adding that community element we talked about before is
Yeah,
to be
great.
said, now we can discern what we need to do about this anger.
Yeah.
And that may involve, consult with some people about that before
Yeah.
you do something about
Sure,
that.
yeah. But I think probably in church circles too, sometimes there is a lot of shame or stigma or whatever it is around it, like, no, so I'm not angry,
And just say, I'm not angry.
Yeah.
Or in fact, you are angry.
Yeah, and God knows you're angry, so, it's okay to
Yeah.
name that.
Yeah.
It's really not, he's not that easily put off. He's
Yeah.
not that small. He's
Yeah.
bigger than that.
Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah.
Fabulous.
Okay, so what do we do when we feel angry?
Yeah, I might let you take this one. Sitting with
Okay,
anger.
so this is, yeah, right. Well, I think probably a good takeaway would be, first of all, the thing I've been harping on about is to name it and notice it. So, okay, what is happening in my body right now? I'm noticing I'm feeling, there are fairly universal things that vary a little bit, like I'm feeling really hot maybe in my face, or I'm noticing my fists doing this, or, that sort of thing. I'm actually angry. If I'm honest about it, I'm really angry. So that is a step that we tend to skip over. If we can name and notice that, then we're halfway there. It's really important. So the next step, I think, if you think about that choice point, which is gone now, is can I extend the gap, maybe, between the naming, noticing stage and the what do I do about it stage. And even if you extend it just by a second, but for example, like an email, I want to fire off a really angry email.
Yeah.
Can I string that out a little bit? Can I sleep on it before I actually send it, that sort of thing? Just because tomorrow this guy will be more integrated again. They'll be talking to each other again, so you're more likely to send something values consistent rather than emotion driven. So, yeah, and then we've got this slide here about sitting with it, because that's a bit of a jargony term that we use a lot because we like it. And people are like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, okay, let's go around, pull some of these ones out here. We've done the acknowledging bit there. Being honest with yourself, I don't love it, but it is what it is right now. So I'm not going to pretend it isn't or lie to myself about it. I'm going to honour it in that regard. And then the delay we just talked about then. Yeah, so delaying either behaviour or delaying numbing. Like, because it is an uncomfortable feeling, numbing is something that a lot of us will go to fairly automatically. But, and numbing can be, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking of obvious ones like alcohol or that sort of thing, but it could be workaholism, it could be watching reality TV. There's lots of ways that we numb out, and a little of that is fine. But if that is our go-to, we can't deal with any kind of feeling, and we immediately flip.
Food.
Yeah, food, 100%.
Yeah.
Flip into numbing. Well, then that's not going to serve us. That's not going to be healthy. So just making space. Like you can, if you're a visual kind of a person, you can sort of almost. Okay, if I could see it, what would it look like? Would it look spiky? Would it look heavy? Would it look red hot like lava? Anything to just kind of step out of it, because remember, you are not your anger, you're experiencing anger. So to be able to take that step back and kind of almost have a curious stance to it, like be a bit of,
Lab coat?
Yeah,
lab
curious
coat.
scientist or a little kid who's never seen one of these anger things before,
Wow.
Yeah. I might be brave enough to just curiously examine it. That's what we just did. Might just allow it to be present without rushing it or making it go away. So just some ideas there. Yeah.
Super good. I mean, one thing that I've found helpful prayerfully sitting with something like this.
Yep.
And I don't know where this came from, but the idea of anger as you're holding a baby in your arms.
Yeah,
And
that's a thing.
And this baby represents my anger, and it's screaming because it's super angry right now. But as I hold it and let it settle there, I imagine that God is wrapping his arms around me and this
that's
baby.
nice.
And so we're all sitting here together, me and my anger and God, and I can then let the baby calm, and the baby might turn into something else. Well,
Yeah.
no, it's getting weird now.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, the baby of anger might actually turn into the baby of disappointment or sadness.
Something a
or
bit more vulnerable.
Actually, something
Yeah.
that's behind the anger.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the work thing, it might actually turn into a baby of rejection, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm feeling rejected, like I don't matter, like I'm not important. And, like, that's the actual deep work that I
Yeah.
feel.
Because sometimes anger will show up first because it's a fairly unsubtle
Sure.
thing and, perhaps not as vulnerable as some of those other things.
Yeah.
So it's safer maybe for some of us to,
Yeah.
and some of us not at all. Some
Yeah.
of us it's a very scary, unsafe feeling because of, past experiences
Yeah,
or whatever.
definitely.
But, yeah.
So good. So good.
Okay, so if I've chosen to forgive but still feel angry, have I really forgiven?
Yeah, this is a great question. Thanks for asking.
That's okay.
I think this is a great question because I think it gets at the heart of some of what forgiveness
yeah.
is kind of really all about. And I think we need to think about this. We started this at the start of the whole series to think about forgiveness from a few different angles. So there's two things that are happening in us at the same time. At the first part, I'm praying, God, I want to forgive them. Or if I don't quite want to forgive them, I'm praying, God, I want to forgive them. Okay, that's my first step. And that as we enter into that process, that God is here with us in this journey, and that forgiveness journey has now started. Feelings, no feelings, that journey has now started. At the same time, all of these other feelings show up. So, like, I want to forgive them, but I'm still angry. So there is a healing piece that has to happen in us, which is what we've been talking about the last sort of few weeks and will continue to. And that's happening in parallel. And we have to remember that we have got a high priest, Jesus, who has been through this whole situation, who has been through betrayal, who's been through disappointment, rejection, and every other thing that we're feeling right now. And he knows what we're feeling in that situation. So when we're sharing our pain with him, we have to remember that he has been through all of this stuff with us. So he's not meeting us with judgment. He's not meeting us with disappointment. He's not meeting us with try harder. He's meeting us in this journey of forgiveness. And both those things are happening at the same time. So yes, you are on this journey of forgiveness. That you're already on this. But our feelings are going to take a while to catch up with some of that. And there's some work that we have to do around that. And that's all happening at the same time. So I think that's super important. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, that's good. But the forgiveness still holds.
Yeah.
If you're forgiven, and that's going to be a journey for you, but you're on that journey. So don't stress about, have I technically crossed the right line here? Because this is not a technical relationship. This is a loving relationship. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's good. Super good.
Okay. Now, we're going to have a time of questions and answers.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
We'll do a little bit of Q&A, and then if I've got time, we'll do a little activity.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So are there any questions that people have about anger, that they wanted to raise about anger? Any questions that people had about that today?